Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex down here in the bottom right hand corner for another tier list upgrade. And I decided to put myself down here so that you guys can focus more on the important stuff, which is right there, especially on the far left for meta defining. Now, in the previous tier list, I did not mention and I forgot to talk at all about Ancient One, so we will be covering Ancient One as well today. But yeah, as far as all the PSAs go for the tier list, just standard disclaimer, these are just my opinions. You can feel free and you're welcome to build any character you want for any piece of content you want. There's more than enough options for you. This is just one person's view of the game and how things shake out. Now we do have the what's this doing here? Sorry, I gotta get rid of that real quick here. We do have the inclusion and the upgrades for Storm and Iceman, as well as Thor, Valkyrie, and Jane Foster, Mighty Thor. So there's actually been quite a few new upgrades that have come to the game, especially in the meta defining category when you consider that much of the update being upgraded here. We also have a bunch of characters that have just been moved back so that I can sort of make space. I've talked about this in previous videos. I haven't come up with a better system just yet, so we basically just retired some characters that were at the end, at the very bottom of Borderline, like Arrow and Sunbird, Amadeus Cho, Iron Fist, Blue Dragon, and Shadow Shell. They've been relegated to the Shadowlanders tier, which I think is completely fair. They have very minor value in other game modes, a little bit of Alliance Conquest, but yeah, I don't think that's really enough of a justification to keep them in Borderline. And then, of course, after moving those people out of Borderline, we freed up space in Meta-ish by moving some characters to Borderline, and likewise for Meta Gods, moving over to Meta-ish. So Rogue got dropped down a tier, Wolverine and Captain America got dropped down a tier, Hulk and Hulkbuster. Hulkbuster's seeing a bit more value these days because he's a really good leadership for Iron Man, so I will acknowledge that. But outside of that, he's really only valuable as, like I said, Alliance Conquest stuff if you build him for that. War Machine and Rescue, same, literally the exact same thing that I said for Hulkbuster, where they're only going to have limited value in Alliance Conquest. Again, War Machine, like Hulkbuster, seeing a revival in his value because he's a really good support for Iron Man. He gives Iron Man, attack, defense, and HP, which is fantastic. But again, besides that, he's very much Borderline. And then Odin, Captain Marvel, and Nova Sam Alexander, although he got the Transcendence, he's still, borderline a PvP character. I know Captain Marvel is the second best option for squad battle, human, villain, universal, but yeah, that doesn't really work. That doesn't really value her for much. So anyways, with all of those out of the way, let's dive into, from the last update, Ancient One. So Ancient One got a really good upgrade. Ancient One is back to being a really solid support. Always a solid support, but like even better support for elemental types, with a huge bump to all elemental damage and ignore dodge. So those two really go well together to increase damage for World Boss Legend, especially against Null. And then Ancient One retains that 50% blast energy attack leadership. Remember, it's only blast types and it's only energy attack, although we have very few physical attacking energy types. I'm looking at you, War Machine. But yeah, still a really good leadership / support for Ancient One. And now Ancient One comes with a pretty solid damage bump. So not the best in the damage department, but if you're at the very end of a world boss run or something like that, and your main DPS dies and you just need to crank out a little bit more damage, honestly, Ancient One can actually do that for you. They're not super proc friendly, but it's good enough to get you through. And if you want to be, bold like me and slap a rage on Ancient One, it actually works. Or you can go the route of an insight. The only downside to Ancient One is that they don't use the third skill with the cleanse anymore. So if you want that cleanse, that debuff removal third skill, I think it's called Ancient Cure, you have to go back and re-equip the old Ancient One uniform. And that also works if you're using Ancient One as a tier 4 striker. So you can also consider that if you're trying to maybe protect Moon Knight from Mephisto's burn damage or something else like that. So yeah, Ancient One still retains a ton of value, but unfortunately a little bit of that value was lost, so you do have to swap back and forth between the new uniform and the old gold, I believe it's a gold cost uniform now, to get that Ancient Cure ability, or maybe the base uniform has it as well. I'm actually not sure. And then we have the addition of Storm and Iceman. I'm going to cover them first because they don't actually impact the meta as much as Thor and Jane Foster do. In Iceman's case, he would actually be higher if it weren't for Storm, because Iceman's basically the best tier 3 mutant in the game right now for PvE content. Now I want to make that very clear because he has basically zero PvP value, and we still have characters like Emma Frost tormenting the PvP scene, absolutely just running wild, basically only checked by Adam Warlock and maybe a super stacked Spider-Man. So yeah, that being said, Iceman does really well. I do feel like he's going to be overshadowed. I feel like some people are going to see him on the list here and think that I'm overvaluing him because they have Storm and because he's not really pushing the bar that much higher. And again, he's not going to push it as far or as easily as Storm will, just on the basis of Storm having level 80, let alone tier 4. But I honestly think Iceman is really good. He's not as proc friendly as I thought, but he's got the offense, he's got some healing now, he's got decent defenses, and he's got really gorgeous animations that make him very, very good. It's a shame that there aren't as many mutant restrictions earlier on in World Boss Legend, around like the 10 to 25 range, because I feel like if there were, a lot more players would see the insane value of Iceman. The other unfortunate thing is that some of the restrictions for World Boss Legend in the early stages, like I mentioned, 10 to 25, have a lot of human restrictions, which doesn't allow you to bring in Iceman. So he's only available for the hero ones and the male ones. But otherwise, he smashes it. So I had to give him some respect, put his dues there. Storm, I'm probably undervaluing a little bit here, but I absolutely hate Storm. And it's not her fault. I've made this very clear in other videos. It's 100% the dev's fault and the balancing fault. But the issue for Storm is twofold. One, very slow movement speed, like the second slowest character in the game in my opinion. And two, very low defenses. Now yes, she has a heal, but the defenses are so low that you get hit once and you're going to be healing for the rest of the battle, even if you don't get hit again. If the heal was 50%, it's a different story, but the heal doesn't cover, right? If you get hit for 50% of your HP and the heal is 15 or 20, you got to click that button 3-4 times, right? And you have to not get hit again in the meantime. So her absolutely abysmal defenses combined with low movement speed make for a literal walking target, just begging you to get one shot or two shot by any of the mechanics. So for those of you who complain that the mechanics in World Boss Legend or in GBR are too difficult to dodge and there's too much going on the screen, I'm not calling you out. I'm saying stay away from Storm, because she's literally the worst possible character in the game to play versus those types of things. But if you can get by all of that, and that's why she's only a meta god, if you can get by all of that, she has one of the highest damage outputs in the game. And that of course has to do with the fact that she is level 80. No denying that. In a year's time, no one's going to be using Storm for anything other than a support, because we're going to have a bunch new level 80s who make her look bad by comparison, because they're going to have as much if not more damage than Storm, and they're going to have movement speed slash higher defenses slash better healing. So we really should be talking right now about what's her name, Rogue tier 4, and I really should be gushing about how she is competing with or eclipsing Valkyrie for the best speed type in the game. But unfortunately, we're here talking about Storm, and I can't say too much else because yeah, that's really how it shakes out. Extremely high damage, and that's literally it. It's just high damage. Oh yeah, and she's a great support. Fantastic support. You have to get the new uniform. It's paywall. The whole Storm thing is just a mess, honestly. But I knew I was going to have to cover it. So yeah, there it is. And then we have Valkyrie. I honestly had Valkyrie lower in the meta god. I had her somewhere in the middle around Kingpin and Cull Obsidian. But then I thought, like, who is a better combat type for your roster? Like, I think the tier list doesn't do enough justice to highlight support types and just how powerful they can make your other characters and your other clears. So I wanted to sort of change that by upgrading Valkyrie to basically the third best combat type in the game. Now, by damage, she's not the third best. She's not even the fifth best by damage. I want to make that clear. But when we're considering the totality, if we're considering like a holistic view of how valuable Valkyrie is and how much she's going to impact your roster and how many people use her, she absolutely deserves to be there, because now her support buffs are even better than they were before. She basically has the best support buffs in the game, in my opinion, if you don't count White Foxes, because hers are only for a limited amount of characters. Not only does she have the best support buffs, but she's now a decent DPS. Like I said for Ancient One, if your main damage dies, you could switch to Valkyrie and finish the fight. You absolutely can. Like, she can crank out some good damage now. She's very proc friendly. I think those two things in tandem really made her a much more appealing character than just slap an insight on her and never use her. So I really like what they did for Valkyrie. Valkyrie's honestly one of the best changes and upgrades they've made to a support type, and I think they need to use the Valkyrie model more often for characters where they say, you know, okay, yeah, we've established this character as a support type. We're going to keep them that way. We're not going to like remove their support buffs, but we're actually going to put them and make them like somewhat of a threat. They don't have to be OP, because an OP character who's also a support type, his name's Green Goblin. We know what happens to him. He doesn't get a tier 3. But having a balance, right? Having them be somewhat useful is really important, because you don't want to switch to your supports and then have them do tickle damage and then you just cry yourself to sleep as you hit the top right corner and hit the try again button and then start from the beginning, right? So yeah, I'm really happy with Valkyrie. And then we move on finally to Thor and Jane Foster. We'll start with Thor because it's pretty easy. He's the best universal type in the game now. Straight up. He has no PvP value, so I will make that very clear. But he basically just rips through all other content. He's the best dispatch farmer now. He's the best Dimension Rift farmer. He beat his brother out. You do need a lot on his build to make him better than Loki. So in terms of a value proposition, it's going to be a lot closer than this. But I think it's fair to say that he's the best, because basically the only game mode where he doesn't eclipse Loki is ABX. And on the flip side, he completely crushes Loki and all other universals in GBR and in World Boss Legend. So I think those two things in tandem really go well together, on top of the fact that he's now the best farmer in the game. Like, that's huge, right? We don't usually get that much value out of a character, and I would say ABX is probably, you know, 4th or 5th on the ladder when you're comparing the most popular game modes. So although Loki dominates ABX and he has been dominating it for a long time, I don't think it holds nearly as much weight as World Boss Legend and GBR combined. But yeah, Thor just is a monster. Seriously consider getting him to level 80 and getting his new uniform. His damage output is just skyrockets. He's got a huge AoE, gorgeous animations. He's got much better heal now than before, and he still retains the movement skill V-pad on the second skill. So basically, he's the opposite of Storm in some ways, where you can easily reposition in between rotations to avoid as much damage as possible. Honestly, Thor is the easiest character. I play Thor, I play Moon Knight, I play Iron Man, I play other characters in GBR. Thor is by far the easiest to play. By far the easiest to play. He doesn't get guard broken, he repositions so he doesn't get punished by mechanics from Dormammu, and he has very, very high burst damage. So yeah, really happy with that. Also considered getting the legendary battle to get that free 4-star artifact, because that bumps his damage up by a lot if you have him at tier 4. I would say only get the legendary battle artifact if you have him at tier 4, but definitely strongly consider it because it's very good. And then we have Jane Foster. I made a mistake in the video in the top 5 World Boss Legend clears video, not mentioning Jane Foster. I think she should have been 5th instead of Supergiant, or maybe 4th, or maybe 3rd instead of Hawkeye. So that's my fault. But yeah, I think Jane Foster is really good, really good for World Boss Legend, but that's kind of it. And I think that's maybe where she's getting overshadowed by Thor, who can do a lot of other things, and Valkyrie, who could do a lot of other things. Jane Foster's a decent support, so I think a lot of people forget that she's a good support type for shock damage allies like Thor. But outside of World Boss Legend, I don't see a ton of value for Jane Foster. However, in World Boss Legend, her value is undeniably top 5. Undeniably top 5. So that was my mistake for not putting her top 5. But yeah, her damage output for World Boss Legend is bonkers at low stages, middle stages, and high stages. She's just consistently super duper good. Basically, the only World Boss Legends she struggles with is very high stages of Mephisto, where she takes too much damage, or Ultron, where he moves around too much and she doesn't have quite enough AoE to keep up with him. But besides that, her damage output is just nutty. I may be overvaluing her a little bit here, putting her so high, but I wanted to make up for the fact that I didn't include her in the top 5 for World Boss Legend, so hopefully you understand. We can always shift her down a little bit, but I think at the very least, she's going to be right at the top of Meta God. So she's not going very far if she is dropping down. Just keep in mind, there may be a bit of an over-evaluation, like a overstatement here. But on the other hand, she's the only character that can do like stage 60 World Boss Legend without level 80. So that's gotta be worth something. Without reforged CTPs anyways. That's definitely gotta be worth something in today's game. So yeah, with that being said, that's how the tier list shakes out. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.